All right, everybody. So if you're in the chat right now, we're live on YouTube. We're live on our little cozy, nobody can find us unlisted stream. How's everybody feeling tonight? Here we are chilling out. It's myself. It is Jay Dyer. What's going on, Jay?
I did. What's up? Glad to be back.
That's great to be back. And I'm glad you're sticking with the cozy Marxist red.
Yeah, I thought it was fitting, so why not keep doing it? I don't know.
It is.
Does it bug you?
No, not at all. Not at all. Like I said,
Okay.
it actually adds a little bit of an intensity to what's going on here tonight. But let's start a little bit by talking about, and as everybody's filing in and everybody's, hey, Ann Christ in the chat room just said, did everyone take their soma? Yes, many grams just to get through this evening, talking about banking collapses and everything else. But as far as the soma goes, let's just do a little bit on top of the general thoughts again, and then we'll get into what people are saying about this second grouping of chapters for Brave New World. Jay, in chapter 1 through 3, it really was a stark introduction to the world in which we were going to be experiencing this story play out. Very suffocating from a genetic standpoint, from the social conditioning standpoint. We saw a lot of parallels to where we are right now. I believe that chapters 4, 5, and 6 were the tail end of that introduction to this world, because in chapter 6 we're getting into a little bit more exploring the rest of the world. You're getting into a little bit more of the characters like Bernard Marx, who are actually he and what's the whole Wilhelm? What's his name again? I forget the guy's.
Helmholtz, Watson.
Yes. You see some struggle inside of people that I want to get around to, and how that is going to express itself as we go deeper into this world. But your general thoughts from chapters 4, 5, and 6, that would be great.
So we're going to get a little, like you said, a little deeper analysis of different characters and their motivations, their psyche, and the most exciting element of the next three will be the religious ceremony, or should I say the techno church rave. So if you enjoyed that chapter, I think that will stick out, because we have the New World religion being mentioned. And I wanted to remind everybody too that another name or two that'll pop up that are significant in terms of characters' names. Remember, we've had Lenin, Marx, Ford, Watson, Engels, Rothschild, all being mentioned, and I think that's clearly on purpose. Not Quigley. Huxley is telling us who really runs this whole real system, basically. So, and it's bloods and brains, right? Bloods being the blue blood people that represent maybe the power structure or the banking structure, and then the brains being the science names. For example, Helmholtz, Watson, J.B. Watson, of course, is the psychologist, and then Helmholtz is a famous German physicist. So you're either named after a scientist or a Marxist or an industrialist.
It's incredible, and there's a lot of, you can see that there is a little bit a concerted effort to kind of, it's hard to see, like, for example, somebody today with this ridiculous paradigm in which the media operates, and they characterize one thing as far left or far right, and you would think that someone like Henry Ford would be on the far right, and but when you look into this, you start seeing that for at least for someone like Aldous Huxley, who was living through this and had seen the world developing in a very serious way, he didn't seem to really see a really stark difference between what kind of role everybody was fulfilling when it came to bringing humanity into new iterations of itself. And it's a serious world view that he's putting out there too. There's nothing left, and so continue on with that. And listen, Jay, don't hold yourself back from going into the deepest of dives whenever it comes up too. You don't have to hold yourself back because of me.
Well, the next element that comes up is that we see more into the caste system and how structured and hierarchical they are, because we're supposed to think that in the revolutions, I thought we were achieving equality, right?
Yes.
But this is a rigid caste system, and you get what he calls town-sized factories. So at Brentford, the television corporation's factory was like a small town. And then we get another insight into the different castes and how they view themselves. And I thought it was interesting, the further delving into how each caste has their own specific conditioning. So if you're a gamma or an epsilon, you're conditioned to believe that it's best for you to be that and everybody else is bad, even the ones that are alphas, right? So the gammas, it says they don't want to be alphas. They're happy to be gammas. I'm glad I'm not a gamma, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
And you're also taught to repeat the mantras of your class as well. So each one thinks that they're kind of the best. And that's part of the control grid, right? For how this whole system kind of holds together. And it's based on but at the same time, there's this claim that everybody's equal in a certain way, right? Because they have these rituals where they want to be joined into one. For example, when we get to the next chapter, it's the 12-in-1 religious orgy sex magic ritual. But at the same time, right, this is supposed to be a society where we have the culmination of all the historical revolutions. And I mean by that, the French Revolution, the Illuminati Revolution, which influenced the French Revolution. Spartacus Weishaupt was a communist, right? Former Jesuit who became founder of the so-called Illuminati, which was a secret society that promoted a radical form of communism. And so we've been thinking for all these centuries of communism that, oh, that's about equality. That's about everybody being equal. No, it's about Brave New World, because he says that this was always the intention of the revolution, was to create this technocratic world order, which is a order based around, Plato's Republic. So that's what we really got going on. And we noticed that the lower castes, the epsilons, the gammas and epsilons, or is it gamma, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon, right? Yeah. They are short, dwarf-like, and slob-like. They're basically like Morlocks.
We get a lot of different
Wells's time machine,
no doubt, and you say that there's very, very dwarf-like or gnome-like almost, even though they're not that short, but a lot more of these random references to color. I think somebody was what was it? What color? It was oh man, one of the groups wears black, one of the groups wears khaki, the green. I forget all the different colors, but yeah, it was a different kind of rosy kind of a color. Not I forget, whatever. But either way, they still throw in those references about, oh, what was another one? Lenina is talking about the misshapenness of somebody's ears and attributed it to maybe they got a little bit too much of one chemical in the decanter. So everybody is a chemical concoction, a concocted human being prototype, and it's still crazy to see that spark of humanity trying to wriggle itself out of what has been created for them, because they all have that gut feel. Some of them have a gut feeling that there's something's not right. Others, like Lenina, total e-thought. This is a cam. This is a cam girl right here.
Lenina got her OnlyFans up.
No doubt.
She got her OnlyFans running.
Keep going.
No, I was just going to say that, I found that section, I think, where it's talking about the different castes. And then it says the various Bureau of Propaganda and College of Emotional Engineering were housed in a single 60-story building on Fleet Street. The floors were press offices and offices of 3 great London newspapers, the Hourly Radio, an upper caste sheet, in pale green, the Gamma Gazette, and on khaki paper was the Delta Mirror. And this came from the Bureau of Propaganda, by television, by the Feeling Pictures, the Synthetic Voices, and the Music, respectively. 22 floors of these, and above these were the research laboratories and the padded rooms for the soundtrack writers and the synthetic composers did their delicate works. The top 18 floors were the College of Emotional Engineering. So the music and the pop culture is all 100% fake, It's synthetic. It's created in a Tavistock style lab in a gigantic building that's dedicated to culture creation. And that's something that we've highlighted all the time over here on my side of things with my books, my wife's books, Jamie's books. You know, this is about this is a future where the culture is completely created, and that's because you don't have individual creativity and all this kind of stuff, right? In this society, it's completely a top-down scientific dictatorship that gives you your culture, and that's what the elites nowadays would actually like to see, is this model.
I'm glad you bring that up, because, you know, a couple of notes I had. Let me first a couple of ones. Oh, well, I mean, chapter 4 opens up with the ethot. She's a popular girl, and one time or another had spent a night with almost all of them here at the Alpha changing rooms. I wrote a little note to myself. I said, gross. I just put that on my thing. But here's another, just go running through here what I have. This is when she was talking with Bernard. He couldn't look more upset if I'd asked if I had made a dirty joke. And what was that dirty joke? Like, asked him who his mother was or something like that. So again, to keep throwing it out down there, anything that you thought would tether you to our world, what a dirty joke here would be. In the future, a dirty joke would be, who is your mother? Because of course, right. A mother is the most obscene thing that you could be or want to have a connection to. But when it comes to what you said there, I said Bernard is pretty much the dejected 21st century male type, and but it was, what's his name, Helmholtz. When Helmholtz is, you can tell that he's got it all, but he's very depressed. He's very inward looking, and he's thinking about something, and he wants to get it out. And you start. Obviously, when we go along in the book, we'll find out a little bit more about what's eating him up. But over here, on page, what is it? It's page 70. What you had said about what creativity in a tyrannical situation like this really is like, this page popped out to me right here. I think this, better as far as we have seen it so far, really shows the plight of the creative mind under these kind of tyrannical situations, how it's just so tiringly limited in what material you can engage in, what kind of, or what material you could entertain, what thoughts you could engage in, what words you can use. I mean, you can't go anywhere. And I think that this page right here, Helmholtz really just seemed to me tired of having all this intellect and a very narrow path, a very narrow hallway of what he can do with it. And maybe to this point you're just not even have allowed yourself to ask the bigger questions, but that was it. So I'm glad you brought that up. I had noticed it too. Let's see here. Page 73. Page 73. Phosphorus recovery. That's where they're looking at the crematoriums.
Yep.
Explained Henry telegraphically. On their way up to the chimney, the gases go through the separate treatments. P2O5 used to go right out the circulation every time that they cremated someone. Now they recover over 98% of it. More than 1.5 kilos per adult corpse, which makes the best part of 400 tons of phosphorus every year from England alone. Henry spoke with a happy pride, rejoicing wholeheartedly in the achievement as though it had been his own. Fine to think that we can go on being socially useful even after we're dead, making plants grow. Did the first thing you think about, everybody at home and Jay, the water cremation, hydro cremation plants, and how they have been not only authorized in several states of the Union over here, but that some have actually been used in fertilizing crops.
Yeah. And of all people, it was Luke Perry several years ago when he died that was one of the first to do this.
What?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he did the water treatment thing, but he was like, I have mandated that when I die, you will make me into fertilizer and put me underneath a tree. So, there's some 90210 for you right there when Luke Perry decided he wanted to be human fertilizing phosphorus. But it made me think of Luke Perry, and it made me think of Malthus and the death care that they're rolling out in Canada right now.
Yep.
It's all of that, exactly. And the I wrote down beneath my notes on the huge crematoriums that there's a euthanasia song, or maybe it's not a song. Let me see what I wrote. I put phosphorus recovery, he said, goes up through the various chimneys, and then we get the different chemicals, blah, blah, blah. Now they recover 98% of it, more than a kilo of a half per adult corpse. So you're still a commodity for the whole system, basically. And then he says that we get this in England alone, tons of it. Henry spoke with a happy pride, rejoicing wholeheartedly in the achievement as though it had been his. Fine to think we can go being socially useful even after we're dead, making plants grow. I don't know why I put euthanasia song. I think I meant to put euthanasia-based society. So yeah, so it's a Malthusian euthanasia-based society, and I think Malthus gets mentioned. A couple pages later, the Malthusian drill.
Yes, it was dropped.
Malthusian blues, which it's an odd thing to name the music style. Slow Malthusian blues.
Yep.
Because Malthus is, of course, the father of population control. So, yeah, he's telling you what this is about, and he's pointing out that we're going to get sort of the hints of some of the MK Ultra stuff in the next section. Because if you remember, that some people theorize that Huxley might have had an early role in MK Ultra in the UK via Crowley's drug diaries. And the more I think about this chapter on the orgy porgy liturgy, that's Crowleyan sex magic. They're also doing drugs, and they call upon the supreme being. So I actually think this is a Crowleyan thing. The more I think about it, and Dr. Richard Spence argues that Crowley's drug diaries influenced Huxley, and thus then MK Ultra.
It was probably around page 77 or 76. It's before the actual the orgy ceremony ritual thing with the chanting, but we do get drugs and clubbing. So I'm looking at this, I'm saying, well, you got I started thinking about Astro World. I started thinking about just generally what has been popular for a long time, the combination of drugs and the hypnotic music scene, EDM in particular. And it
seems like techno. Yeah, it's a techno church.
No doubt. I mean, this seemed very modern, very relatable. The drugs and the clubbing thing, I said, whoa, okay. But then when you get to part 2 on page 78, and that's when we are at alternate Thursdays, where Bernard's Solidarity Service Days. And that, I had forgotten. Last time I read this was back in 2017 or 18, or what, I think 17 or 18. So I had forgotten all about this. I forgot about the orgy porgy. I forgot about everything. So when I saw service days, I was like, I forget how religious of a situation this was, especially when it came down to the name drop. That's where you get a nice name drop of Rothschild for the first time. Morgana Yep. Rothschild, that's who he got to hook up with, Bernard Marx. But then you have on... Man, all of the prayers, the church-like prayers. Ford, we are 12. Oh, make us one. Like drops within the social river. Oh, make us now together run as swiftly as thy shining flivver. And there's so much more that comes out here. I'll tell you one thing that I picked up. It's on page 84. It's the third paragraph. It's all the second full paragraph. Feeling that it was time for him to do something, Bernard also jumped up and shouted, "I hear him. He's coming." But it wasn't true. This is when everybody was going around the room and saying, "I hear him. I hear him," and they're just, it's again social conditioning. You don't want to be the one to break the chain. You might actually even start thinking you hear something. Then again, you're all hopped up on soma and the music and everything else. I hear him, but it wasn't true. He heard nothing, and for him nobody was coming, nobody, in spite of the music, in spite of the mounting excitement. But he waved his arms, he shouted with the best of them, and when the others began to jig and stamp and shuffle, he also jigged and shuffled. Jay, and everybody at home, I believe that paragraph right there explains how most liberals live like. I really do believe that the pressure to conform, and I really do believe that it is that powerful. I mean, this is just human condition it could
Yeah,
be.
they drink it like a Last Supper ritual. If that's what you're talking. And he talks about the buttocks is like clapping. Is he making it? They making it clap. Clap.
But that's it.
Twerk.
Are they actually
twerking in church?
They're actually slapping each other's asses, though. No, right?
They are. Yeah, they're making butts clap or something like. He uses some phrase. Like
they're throwing it back.
We were looking at that. My wife and I. Yeah, so you have this idea that they want to be blended into one, and so there's the solidarity ritual is presided over by this figure who blesses in the name of our Lord, and then he makes the sign of the Tau, the T, as in Model T Ford, right? So the Model T has replaced the cross as the symbol of this ritual. It's a kind of a civic religion, which we get from people like Auguste Comte, who had the idea back at the beginning of early social theory. He was in the train of those in the French revolutionary theorists who were socialist. And Auguste Comte, again, basically one of the co-founders of sociology, the discipline, he said that the state needs to invent and create a fake state-based religion, a civic religion that it could control. And I think that's kind of what's being hinted at here. And so what they found to be the best blending of that is something that has elements of Christianity, elements of mind control, drugs, and basically like we said, like a rave. So it's basically like a rave. And in this ceremony, you got 12 people who come together and they want to become one. And they call upon the supreme being, which is, I think, intended to be kind of Masonic. It's called the greater being, but I mean, it might as well be the supreme being. You have 12 people, which is, again, kind of anti-Christian symbology, which we already saw with Mustafa Mond when he was saying that the little sexualized children should come unto him, right? He had that antichrist imagery going on. And then I think this ceremony is supposed to be a kind of orgiastic initiation ritual that's in an inversion, right? It's almost kind of like it really is kind of like a sex magic ritual, right?
No doubt.
And so again, I think it's a Crowleyan thing. They sing these songs, they chant this stuff. There's one other thing I was going to tell you that stuck out to me, and they say it's a liturgy. They even make reference to a liturgical refrain, which means that it's right like a church service. And it reminded me of I apologize if I'm over mentioning this, because I mention it all the time. Every time on a podcast, I mention the C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy. In the third one, you're going to love that when you get to that. In the third volume of the Space Trilogy, the illuminate, confirm, initiate people. Everybody thinks they're scientists. They're this technocratic elite, and they initiate people through something like this.
Really?
It's pretty wild.
Oh, wow. No, I have to read it. No doubt. I have to read that. That's something I have to put on my list. And
particularly the third one, it'll really blow your mind.
How many in that set? 3?
Just 3.
Just 3.
Yeah, the Space Trilogy is 3 volumes, and they're all very different. But the third one is basically a dystopia like this.
Well,
but it's more of it's a Christian version of it. It's like if a Christian wrote a dystopia, so it has a good message. Not a 1984 and Brave New World have pretty depressing messages.
It's very depressing, and here's where it gets where I think we're going now, because everything that you and I just spoke about right there, and everybody in the chat room that's following along, and everybody at home too who listens to this after the fact. We have pretty much summed up what was going on inside of chapters 4 and 5, which I think up to and including the end of chapter 5 is the official crash course in building the foundation for the world that you are going to see these characters fulfill the plot now, in which they're going to be fulfilling the plot. We've got everything from how humanity is created and managed on a biochemical sense to keep everything no more pyramid-like structures to society. It has to be a straight column. How everybody is in their own caste system. We have seen the social conditioning. We have seen the promiscuity, the stripping away.
Move towards the world religion.
No, and there you go. The last one right there is what supplements the spiritual end of things. And there you go. There's the world religion, that kind of universalist thing. Now, chapter 6 is where I think we kick off into what the rest of the book is, the adventure that is going to be there, and a lot of the confusion and the conflict inside of characters like Bernard Marx. Over here, Bernard has Lenina out with him, and I think it's on page 89. This is where you see how the relationships are even more confounding than usual. I mean, you go, any one of us, we grow up, we meet new people, friends, girlfriends, boyfriends, we get married. The human relationships are complex, and it takes a lot of, messing up and learning about people to actually be able to read a room, to read body language, whatever. And it's hard enough. Human beings are as confounding as they are, but it's so much harder than usual, you can see, for these people, because they actually can't. There's nothing inside. They have no tools available to them to form a relationship.
Well, they're controlled by hedonism, and so, like we said, sexuality has been divorced from any kind of meaningful pair bonding and from procreation, and it's turned into something that's completely recreational for pleasure's sake, and it's done on purpose to control. So you control the society through their base desires, and ultimately you control them through arrested development. That's why Helmholtz keeps asking, why do we have to be like kids? Why can't we be adults? And then I think Bernard asked something very similar to, or one of the two. And that's because everybody's kept in this immature state of arrested development. And Huxley was predicting exactly where we are, right? I mean, this was like 30 years before the 60s sexual revolution, right? Mm-hmm. So here we are in 2023, basically entering into a brave new world, which is what he wrote about in the 1930s. So, yeah, that control through the base passions is sometimes called libido dominandi, control through hedonism, and keeping everybody in this arrested development state, which is also, again, a Crowleyan idea, the aeon of the child.
And here it is right there. Apparently, this is on page 89. Apparently, for going on walks in the Lake District, for that was what he now proposed, land on the top of Skiddaw and walk for a couple of hours in the heather. Alone with you, Lenina. But Bernard, we shall be alone all night. Bernard blushed and looked away. I meant alone for talking, he mumbled. Talking? But about what? It's so out of... I mean, she can't even consider or comprehend what...
Yeah, they don't want to think. Thinking is something looked down upon, and that's why they retreat to pleasure anytime they're tempted with wanting to think.
On page 91, this should be very, very familiar to people right now. Page 91, in a different key. How can I? He repeated meditatively. No, the real problem is, how is it that I can't? Or rather, because after all, I know quite well why I can't. What would it be like if I could, if I were free, not enslaved by my conditioning? But Bernard, you're saying the most awful things. Don't you wish you were free, Lenina? I don't know what you mean. I am free to have the most wonderful time. Everybody's happy nowadays. And you will own nothing, and you will be happy. They literally have nothing. They don't even have their own thoughts. But they have the soma, and they have the state. And it is the most stark realization of everything that the World Economic Forum publishes on a regular basis. It's just incredible what Lenina embodies as far as Klaus Schwab's vision for the world.
Yeah, exactly. There was a couple more names that popped up too. Bakunin, Hoover, and Habibullah. And I didn't know who Habibullah was, but Habibullah Khan was a reform-minded, enlightened monarch who brought modernity to Turkey. So he was seen as a super duper progressive for the time, and so that's the only reason his name is relevant. Herbert Hoover, I guess Hoover Dam and all that for the public works projects, and then Ingalls had been mentioned as well. I just want to call attention to the names because Huxley, I think, is keying us into, by using all these various names from the past, right?
Yes.
The real secret, I guess you could say, behind who's going to create the Brave New World.
And as they go through the rest of chapter 6, I think that this is really just the greatest introduction to what is going to drive the character Bernard Marx throughout the rest of the book, because this interaction, this circular, unfulfilling interaction with Lenina, that pretty much by page 93 you get the impression that that Bernard lives in a planet that is filled with ethos and Instagram.
Exactly.
And
well said. Yeah.
Instagram models. That's just what it is. Like, for example, you think I'm all right. Another nod. In every way, perfect, he said aloud. And inwardly, he said to himself, she thinks of herself that way. She doesn't mind being meat. You know, like,
yeah, exactly. She's happy with it.
And I
was thinking too about the saxophonist. Did you notice that instead of a saxophone, it's called a saxophone?
Yes. I was waiting to see if they had described what.
I didn't. Yeah, I was wondering why. It made me think of like Sexy Sax Man. You know, the Tim Capello guy from the Lost Boys. Sexy Sax Man.
What is that? The guy who plays the Wham cover over and over again?
No, you've seen Lost Boys, right?
Oh yes. Yeah. Oh yes.
The saxophone guy.
Yes. Okay. Got you.
He's called Sexy Sax Man. I'm not saying he's sexy. That's just joking. No, they made a skit on Saturday Night Live with John Hamm where he was like that guy. Anyway, so when I saw saxophone, it made me think of that. But everything is sexualized, right? The whole society is basically dominated by that libido dominandi, the drive, our base drives, basically. Anyway, I didn't mean to go back to that, but that's why Lenina is, like you said, like not a very likable character, because she has no desire to not be a slave to this system. Mm-hmm. But the system controls you by making you a slave to pleasure.
Yes. And to end this, I don't know what he was thinking, because Bernard Marx has access to the Savage Reservation. And I don't think she's ever been there before. And to end chapter 6, they're going on over to take a look at this. I thought that on page 103, this was pretty telling about how they characterize what's going on in this reservation, as opposed to how amazing everything is inside of the laboratories. About 60,000 Indians and half-breeds, absolute savages. Our inspectors occasionally visit, otherwise no communication whatever with the civilized world. They still preserve their repulsive habits and customs, marriage, if you know what that is, my dear young lady, families, families, no conditioning, monstrous superstitions, Christianity and totemism, and ancestor worship, extinct languages such as Zuni and Spanish and Athapascan, pumas, porcupines, and other ferocious animals, infectious diseases, priests, venomous lizards. Sign me up, Jay. It sounds like there's some excitement there, at least.
Yeah, I think it's like a zoo, right? So they picture the reservation, quote unquote, as it's just part of the overall scientific dictatorship experiment, and the natural reservation is really just a human zoo that, kind of like a museum, preserves the old ways of life, but only for scientific purposes. That's it. It's not like you can opt out and go live there or something like that, right?
Yes, and
yeah, it is odd that they kept this quote reservation, and that probably is hearkening. And you'll notice it's in the areas where in the U.S. there's Indian reservations, right? And the thing about Indian reservations is that those are some of the first places where we can really see the microcosm of the technocratic control grid that was rolled out a long time ago by getting the Indians onto welfare, getting them onto reservations. That was a means of control. And if you've ever driven to those areas of the country, I've been over there many times through that area, all of the areas where the Indian reservations are, you can see how it's totally a control system. It's just a means of creating a ghetto control system. We're all now the Indian reservation in terms of Klaus and Gil Bates and all these characters on a global level. That's the macro scale version of this. But I think Huxley is intentionally choosing the idea of reservation to key us into the fact that, that's how they're, we're all on a reservation, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, if they get their 15-minute cities, we're all going to be in terrarium. Exactly. I mean, that's literally terrariums. Exactly. That the line project out there in Saudi Arabia, you want to put people in a however mile long fishbowl, and it's just
exactly
that's what it is. Okay, over here on the thread now. This is from Karina. Karina says, I understand what you mean, because I felt the same way about such and such. I will say that it's one of the hardest books I've had to read so far, totally out of my comfort zone. It blows my mind it was written in 1937. Gino Says it's interesting that even when every human is engineered to the way the elites want them to be engineered, they still have a Bureau of Propaganda and College of Emotional Engineering. Also funny that the 3 great London newspapers are housed there. At least all the way back then, Huxley is straight up admitting the media is just propaganda.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Lennox says, I just watched talking about Demolition Man. I was surprised that it contained many references to Brave New World, including the character Sandra Bullock plays is Lenina Huxley. Here is a link to watch the movie for free. I haven't seen Demolition Man. I haven't seen that in a long time.
Oh, that's right. She's called Lenina. I forgot that.
I'm going to have to watch that.
Yeah, we did a whole breakdown of Demolition Man, and I actually forgot this. I'm glad that person mentioned that. You should go watch it because it's a social justice society. So that was something that Demolition Man got that all the other dystopias didn't get. Because like I said, Jamie and I, we watched chronologically all the dystopias. So like whatever year the dystopia is supposed to take place was the order that we watched it in. So I forget what year. I don't know if Demolition Man is like 2100 or 2800, so 2180 or something like that. But yeah, you can't, you don't have physical sex because there's a scene where when they wake Sylvester Stallone up in the future from cryogenics, he thinks he's going to get laid with Sandra Bullock, and they're sitting there and she's like, okay, put your glasses on now. And it's like these VR goggles.
Yep.
So, and then he's like, I thought we were going to do it. I thought we were going to get laid. And she's like, ew, no, I'm not going to touch your bodily fluids.
I have to see this movie again. It's been so long.
It'll blow you away now. It has false flags in it. It's got everything in it.
Jeez. Okay. All right.
Super soldiers. So both was Wesley Snipes and Sly are super soldiers.
Thank you for that, Lennox. So Lennox, if you follow Jay, obviously, I'm sure that'll pop up sometime in the next couple of streams that you do. Here is another one. Dyslexic Angel replied to that, said that is a great and prophetic movie. I watched it again a couple of years ago when I sensed we were heading down a path that I was uncomfortable with, much like reading this book, very uncomfortable. And Linda Semmel says, I would love it if Jay could give a brief history of Aldous Huxley. Did most of his ideas come from his brother? I'm listening to Michael York read the book on Audible and reading along. I only mention it because Michael York does such a great job and brings the book to life. Do you know anything about Aldous Huxley's, his brother, his background, where he comes from?
I don't remember a lot about his personal background, except that all 3 of them were part of that inner clique, and I don't think he was a noble truth teller trying to help people out, because there's three brothers. I think there's 3. So Julian is the one that coins the term transhumanism, and he writes UNESCO's philosophy. That's one of the global elite texts that we've covered, is the philosophy of UNESCO by Julian Huxley, and that's just 100% a biometric technocratic control society. That's what the whole philosophy is about. It's not fiction, it's the philosophy of UNESCO. I have another book of his that we've covered called something like Science of Revolution or History of Scientific Revolution, something like that. It's pretty good. It has one chapter that's relevant for like technocratic control. And then the other brother, I forget his name, but he was one of the MKUltra doctors in Australia. So quite a bit of crazy stuff going on with, there's Leonard Huxley was the dad, Julia is the mom. I don't know much about them. And then he has Julian, his brother. And then I don't know where I don't know where I got that. I thought there's another brother. Maybe it's a cousin. There's a cousin called Peter. So maybe that's what I'm thinking of, another relative. But anyway, I mean, they come from the Galton, Darwin, Huxley bloodlines. Thomas Huxley was the great granddad, zoologist, agnostic, controversialist. He's called Darwin's bulldog. So his granddad was the like evangelist for Darwinism.
So there's quite a pedigree there, no doubt about it.
They're they may be inner party members.
Okay.
When it comes to the elite, you know.
So when you consider somebody like this, inner party members, and they write as I mean, I don't know if it's just realism or if it's just disparaging about what the plans for the future are. Was Huxley a agent of the light who's trying to warn people, or is he playing against that karmic revelation of the method where you got to tell people what's happening, or else you're going to?
No, I think he was 100% a Luciferian initiate, part of the inner party.
So this is a taunt then.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
If you watch his Berkeley lectures, he even speaks that way. He's like, well, of course, even the audience don't realize we're going to do this, and you don't even realize it. And even if I told you, you couldn't believe it. He taunts them in his lectures.
That turns it all around for me right there, Jay. I didn't know if this was just somebody trying to warn the world, but you're
no, he's like up there towards the eye. He's up near the top of the pyramid.
Jeez, he's taunting the world. That makes this even worse. God, oh man. That makes this even darker.
Yeah, he's up at most of the people in the Royal Society are pretty much anybody that's up in the Royal Society. You don't get there unless you're in on all this.
Well, Lee. All right. Well, here's one from Unfettered. Unfettered says, the entire solidarity service was off-putting, but this in particular was resoundingly disturbing. Quote, the service had begun. The dedicated soma tablets were placed in the center of the table. The loving cup of strawberry ice cream soma was passed from hand to hand, and with the formula, I drink to my annihilation, 12 times quaffed. That there too got me too, Jay. I drink to my annihilation. Unfettered goes on to say, Bernard Marx is not really a likable character, and yet his capacity to seek a self-identity, if only just because his physical inadequacy sets him apart and isolates him, is in a sense heroic. Heroic in that when you stop to consider the layers upon layers of conditioning, from test tube to embryonic chemical manipulation to hypnopaedia, through childhood and on, the constant conditioning, brainwashing, and manipulation to resist, in even the slightest degree, such conditioning is heroic display of the human being still present despite it all. There is something truly hopeful in that every attempt to suppress and destroy the organic human being, still the human spirit persists. I think I've mentioned something to that degree a couple times now, that despite everything going against them, there's still that spark, that even if they can't articulate what it is, what's making them feel off, that some characters are clawing to figure out what it is. I think that's remarkable in itself.
By the way, I apologize. I got distracted because I was trying to figure out who the other Huxley was. So there's a good book that I recommend reading called MK Ultra in Australia. You can find it on archive.org. It came out in 2015. It's basically a little 100-page little text. I printed it out and read the whole thing, and that's how I came across this. So there's another relative. He is part of the Huxley family, but he is a physicist named Leonard Huxley. And he was involved in MK Ultra stuff in Australia. Because for those that don't know, MK Ultra is it's not just the U.S. OSSCIA program. It's actually done everywhere. It's done at universities in Canada. It's done, it turns out, also in a lot of MK Ultra programs in Australia. So one of those weird characters was a relative of Huxley I'd never heard of, Leonard Huxley. So, but anyway. I apologize. I got distracted about that. What were you talking about, Frank?
Oh, well, it was a Unfettered, a member of the audience, had just put out there a little excerpt from the solidarity service, and and then quipped about how they, even though Bernard Marx is not a likable character, and I saw a couple other people agree with this. I think it was NJSF had agreed with it, and a little bit farther down the line, Dyslexic Angel agreed with it as well. They said, I found Bernard a great example of no matter how hard humanity tries to create the idealistic world, if we do not own our actions, thoughts, behavior, we end up creating the exact thing that we were running away from. With all the conditioning, brainwashing, manipulation, we still have a mind to think, a private place where all we can still be is ourselves. You see, this is why the Soma and the group activity in that religious setting is so important, because there's obviously some kind of a human spark, an essence that can't be suppressed, even if you took I said the blueprint for what is a human being, and you constructed it in a lab instead of inside of a woman's womb. That blueprint for humanity comes something inherent inside of it is untamable, at least to a degree. Some people, it just you can bury it down under the drugs and under the conditioning better than others. But that's really what we see with the Wilhelm Holtz and with Bernard Marx a little bit more. And I agree, he's not really a likable character. He's kind of manic and insecure and whatever. But wouldn't you be if you're the only one that doesn't like taking the pills and doesn't like the orgies and that's all life is? So I understand. I understand how miserable of a moment or a process of self-actualization this must be for any of these characters.
Yes. The ritual, is also, we should mention, homoerotic, and that's relevant not just because of the PEDO stuff from chapter 3, but if you look up there's 2 secret societies that are relevant to this section of the book with the ritual. I know you were talking about Bernard kind of being an outsider and being there's elements of Bernard we like and elements that we don't like, but he's the first character that we think is going to question the system. It'll later kind of, I think we're supposed to more so sympathize with John the Savage as sort of the protagonist. But I did want to mention also, I just remembered that T.H. Huxley started a secret society called the X Club, and the X Club was all these people in the Royal Society in the 1800s, a bunch of people, some of whom are known for promoting Darwinism, like Herbert Spencer, but they wanted to basically form a pseudo-secret society of scientists to promote Darwinism everywhere. And the weird part is that by the time it gets to Huxley's time, there's another semi-secret society known as the Cambridge Apostles. Do you know about them?
No.
So this is a secret society at Cambridge University, and this is all a bunch of people. And I was trying to remember if Huxley was a part of this. I don't see his name mentioned, but Alfred Lord Tennyson, John Maynard Keynes, the famous socialist, Fabian socialist economist, Wittgenstein, the famous philosopher, Bertrand Russell, G.E. Moore, they were all part of this. And it's a, how should we say, a Skittles men's club, secret society. They also tie into the Cambridge spy scandal. Do you know about that?
Yes, to a degree. I think it's very familiar.
So basically, British intelligence type people is who's in the back of all this. And so this is, Huxley's giving you the worldview from the vantage point of British intelligence. And I mean, I don't know if Huxley himself was in British intelligence. I think he was kind of the level above those kinds of people, because he's more of a propagandist for that elite system. But I think we are supposed to have these characters that we, in differing degrees, identify with and dislike. So, Lenina is not a totally unlikable character, because she does have a couple traits where we like her because she likes some of the unorthodox characters, kind of, right?
Yes.
But for example, she does unorthodox things, like she wants to be in a longer relationship, right? I think Huxley's saying that women do kind of tend to want to have that kind of a relationship. We don't really like him. Helmholtz is a more likable character because he's more philosophically, astute to question the system. But Bernard Marx is more of a rebel, but he's also got kind of petty, shitty tendencies. So he's not that great of a character either. Mustafa Mond is very much a, controlling antichrist kind of figure. So we haven't really been introduced to anybody that's like really that virtuous so far, except that it'll probably be John the Savage who's coming up.
Yeah. There's a couple more here, but I think we can start wrapping up with the one poster on the thread. NJSF left a long, very detailed breakdown of every chapter with a lot of excerpts and some thoughts. What I will, because we don't have time for all of it, but I will take this out of it. He says, also interesting how then Alpha Plus, Helmholtz, I'll learn his name by the end of this, Helmholtz Watson, also got an individuality trait, while still feeling superior to everyone, but finding in Bernard Marx the one person he can talk to about these feelings.
Yeah.
Here's the quote. And mental excess had produced in Helmholtz Watson effects very similar to those which in Bernard Marx were the result of a physical defect. Too little bone and brawn had isolated Bernard from his fellow men, and the sense of his apartness, being by all the current standards a mental excess, became in its turn a cause of wider separation. That which has made Helmholtz so uncomfortably aware of him being being himself and all alone was too much ability. What the two men shared was the knowledge that they were individuals. Now, NJSF leaves one more comment here. Says, however, his high level of rationalization leaves him stuck and without action to progress. This, to me, makes clear how a moral foundation for everybody is crucial. And I guess that goes back to what I was saying before, where you see how kind of depressed and downtrodden he is. He has all this ability, and I didn't even go to the moral foundation as I did the societal constraints. To have all of
he had a hell a bunch of notches too. Remember that he had slept with like
everybody.
They say he had like 450 in the last 640 women in the last 4 years.
He called him. Huxley calls Helmholtz an inexhaustible lover. I think. Yeah, inexhaustible. Where he needed to be having sex like a couple of times a day to even rack up those numbers.
Right.
Exactly. So he said, "Did you ever feel?" He asked, as though you had something inside you that was only waiting to give you a chance to come out. Some sort of extra power that you aren't using, like all the water that goes down the falls instead of through the turbines. He looked at Bernard questioningly. Not quite. I'm thinking of a queer feeling I sometimes get, a feeling that I've got something important to say and power to say it, only I don't know what it is, and I can't make any use of the power. If there is something different, some different way of writing, or else something else to write about. I'm pretty good at inventing phrases, the sort of words that suddenly make you jump, almost as if you'd sat on a pin. They seem so new and exciting, even though they're about something hypnopathically obvious, but that doesn't seem enough. It's not enough for the phrase to be good. What you make with them ought to be good too. And I thought about where we are right now in this phase in our society where it's so common to listen to a person who talks forever, especially a politician, and has nothing to fucking say. Especially when you get into these social justice warrior groups, and it is constantly the same points being made with slightly different terminology. People, that is how people win these days. There's no merit to the arguments anymore. They only have one conclusion they can draw. They have only one victim. They only have one oppressor. They can only ask for money and retribution and reparations in so many ways. That's where the real skill now in orating comes from. You're not telling stories in Hollywood anymore. You have to tell the same story in different. How can you tell the same story in a different way? How many, what color is the costume of the main character in this one? But it has to be a woman, and it has to kick all the men's asses. Like you can't, there's no expression. So I understand what he's talking about there 100%, because I see that is what really limits storytelling in the modern day already.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. The woke storytelling is, it's cultural engineering, and that's what we had seen earlier in the story. And we kind of passed over it, but did you notice the reference to women's heavyweight wrestling?
Yes, heavyweight wrestling.
So, and again, think about in 1930s, I don't think there was women's heavyweight wrestling, but the women have been engineered to be, masculine as well. So
that's it.
Anyway, so the vapidness of the society is interesting, and that's what we this is pretty standard in dystopian stories, where the character who's questioning the system is, unhappy with the kind of, the vapid low quality of everything in the society. And again, that's why you're not supposed to think. You're a bad person if you're questioning. And I think you, myself, all of us who've been involved in this kind of conspiracy research for so many years, like we've definitely seen that. Like we're the bad people because we question and we think about, well, why is it this way? Who set up the Federal Reserve? Why does the World Economic Forum get to say what's going on during COVID? Right? Like all of these kinds of questions that you're not supposed to ask. Huxley saying that the bad people who are actually stumbling onto the truth are the ones asking the questions. And you should watch the Berkeley lectures that accompany the book, because he says quite a bit in that too, and explains how real the book is. And he says something like, any sane society would consider this insane. Mm-hmm. And he's like, so what we have to do is just basically change everybody's idea of what's insane. So just invert everything. And he says that's how we'll pass this over on everybody. And he said that one of the things that 1984 missed, which is a central piece of my book, is this sacrament of drugs. And so we now live in the big pharma world, especially post-COVID, right?
Yes.
And so that should be all the more evident that he was describing, aspects that even Orwell didn't get right.
And I think that you and I, on our separate broadcasts before, we have you might have, I think I know this because I think you might have had it as part of one of your InfoWars broadcasts on the 4th hour. Because I've been flipping through TalkStream Radio several times and put on InfoWars when you're live, and I listen and I think that you and I have both spent a considerable amount of time actually breaking down the parallels between what we're living through post 2020 and the emergence of a pseudo religion where the drugs are the Eucharist. They have their mantras, they have their holidays, they have their martyrs, they have their heroes. It's an incredible parallel, and to see it really come full circle in a book like this. Now I have a suggestion that maybe for next week we read chapters 7 through 11. So it's like 70 pages. It's page 108 until 171. And that would put us on track to be able to finish the book before the end of March. That's what I just didn't want to, I wanted to have a nice crisp reading experience, and I think that 7 to 11 would be good.
Okay, and that's perfect.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the chat room has been on fire tonight. People have been wonderful. These thread whatchamacallits. Put that down so I can think straight. All of the submissions to the thread have been fantastic. I really love that. Jay, have you been sharing the thread with your subscribers?
Well, I've been sharing the videos.
Okay, cool.
I saw you sent me the thread today, so I haven't shared that yet, but I'll be happy to when I send out this part 2 to my subscribers. So yeah.
No doubt. And when I make the thread for session 3, I'll send that to you as soon as I publish it, in case anybody in your audience that is reading along wants to contribute, because then we can read it onto the air. But yeah, dude, this has been great. Anything you leave with before we conclude for the evening?
No, covers all my notes. Let me see. I did have in chapter 6. Let's see. No, that's it. She put that she doesn't mind being a piece of meat. She wants Bernard begins to feel the desire to be free. The society is childlike, arrested development. Everybody's infantile, alien of the child. Yeah, we got everything.
Well, this is it. I mean, these chapters that are coming up right now, we are introduced to pivotal characters, and we're going to see the plot go into. We're going on the reservation, not off the reservation, and that'll be good. Jay, thanks for everything, my friend. Send my best to your wife, and we'll talk soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank. Have a good night.
Take care. Ladies and gents, that's me from before. Look, that's the past. You see that frozen on screen? You're looking at the past. Now this is the present. You see how much I've aged? I have had a great time with you guys. Thank you. I see Kim Robles, Nancy Nelson, Dwayne, Mary Sue, Ann Christ, NJSF is there. Let's see here. Ruben, Ashley, Rosie, Jimmy, Kim, Casey Kakalaki, our good buddy Jerry, representing the entire country of Scotland, Katie, and I'm happy that you guys are here. Next week, we will get together, same time, same place, and man, we're going to have a nice, crisp month of March. We're going to read this book in the month of March, and then we'll have a little bit of a break in April, maybe May, and then I think in June we'll jump into de Tocqueville. But for now, keep all of your thoughts going and keep highlighting and writing notes, and I will put that thread up by hopefully tomorrow for session 3, and we're going to have a great time. Thank you for everything. It has been enlightening. It truly has. Talk to you soon.